Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. I'm your host, Jace.
And I'm Blake.
And if you're checking us out on YouTube, you'll see a whole new format. I took a crash course in OBS. That stands for Open Broadcast Software. So that's how we're able to have all these cool, fancy new graphics for you guys. Don't know if you care, but I mean, it looks night and day. So we appreciate it. We hope that you enjoy it. So this is what we'll have moving forward. And like I said, yeah, hopefully everybody likes the way it looks now. So with that being said, we're going to kick it off with the next book in the reading order, which is Spawn number 67. So yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and dive right in. Let me get it up on the screen so you guys can all see what it looks like. There's that great Capullo cover. Spawn's got a gun to his head, and of course the thought is, well, who cares if Spawn has a gun to his head? It doesn't make a difference. He's Spawn. He's immortal. Well, maybe things aren't quite quite what they seem in this one, which makes for a pretty interesting issue. So as we check out the inside of the front cover, we see the credits, story by Todd McFarlane, pencils by Greg Capullo, inks by McFarlane and Chance Wolfe, copy editor and lettering Tom Orzechowski, colors are by Brian Haberlin and Dan Kemp, and we get the recap of 66, which I know it's been a little while, so I'll kind of go over the whole thing. We saw that Cog met up with Sam and Twitch. He gave them that whole kind of recap, and then dropped the bombshell on them. This was 2 issues ago in 65. Dropped the bombshell on them that they were the knights. That Spawn was their master. Not that they were necessarily slave, but yeah, they were knights. They were subservient. They were the warriors of Spawn in a way. And so they did get Cog to agree to go with them back to their office for more questions. But when Sam Burke started, I don't want to say mouthing off, but he was being sarcastic. He was like, what are you talking about with this? We're the servants of Spawn, not really buying it. And Cog just disappeared. They went under a tunnel. It got dark, and when they got to the other side of the tunnel, Cog was gone. Meanwhile, Spawn had, at this point, thought he still had the human face. He's back in Rat City, put on a suit, thought he was going to have a chance to go meet with Wanda, and as he was walking down the street, he had some gangs making fun of him. He smelled real bad. He looked at his reflection in a shop window and realized his face had sloughed off. Obviously, he was really upset and mad, and Cog showed up and was kind of giving a little bit of an "I told you so." Like, yeah, I told you not to waste the time when you had that face, wasting that time to go after Jason Wynn, but you didn't believe me. You went and tried to take Jason Wynn down. So obviously that brought a lot of frustration to Al Simmons. And we also saw that Cyan's bond to that shoelace that used to stitch Spawn's face together, that is tied around her pacifier. She loses control. She completely goes nuts when she doesn't have that pacifier in her mouth. So that's where we are right now. Yeah, pretty interesting place to be in a lot of ways. Anything to add before we dive into this issue, Blake?
No, not really. It's nice to be back to the main series.
Yeah, definitely.
We had a lot of spin-offs, a lot of tie-in material, but, now it should be, Spawn for a little more longer.
Yeah, we definitely dive into a big long run of regular issues, and that reminds me, Blake has put together the reading order. I'll remind everybody once again, it's in the show notes. It's a Google Doc. He's got notes in there of why things are where they are. If you want to know where we're headed, the order to read everything, you can just go and check that out. It's a fantastic resource. So anyway, as we dive into the issue, we see there's a blackout in New York City. There's lightning, storming, and Twitch is asking Sam, hey, where's the batteries? I told you to buy some batteries. Sam's like, quit bugging me. He's actually on the toilet. He's like, this place is, I didn't have a chance to get batteries, busy. And which is like, it's such a money pit. As he's sitting there, light comes back on. There you see the bathroom, which is not maybe the greatest scene that Capullo's ever drawn, but it's pretty funny. You see some shiplap through the sheetrock there, or plaster. We see little pinups of women. Sam sitting on the toilet eating, which is absolutely disgusting. Put stuff in while stuff's coming out. So anyway, they're talking about Spawn. He's like, what are we going to do? We need to track him down and figure out why this guy Cog thinks that we're his knights, like what's going on. And they're making a plan, basically. So as Sam comes out of the bathroom, Twitch does find some flashlights for the battery. Maybe better late than never. When their kind of one paying client, we're told, shows up. And she's a character. Her name is Mrs. Bird, and she's got all these conspiracy theories, and she's talking about little green aliens and how they've kidnapped her and performed these experiments on her and whatnot. And they really don't want to have much to do with her, but at the same time, they're like, man, we got to pay the bills, and she is like their one paying customer. So Sam's hiding out in the bathroom because he knows she's there. So Twitch is like, you know what? I'm gonna sneak out, and you go, knock on the door, and Sam will help you. So she does that, and she says, I know you're hiding in there. Your pal said that you were going to handle this while he stepped out, so help me out. And Sam rather, is standing in the bathroom going, what am I doing with my life? Oh, man, Twitch is a dead man. So, yeah, Twitch got the upper hand for once on Sam. Meanwhile, the bums are hanging out in the alley in Rat City, talking about how cold it is that time of year and whatnot. And one of them, he's a new guy that we haven't seen much before. And he's real surly, and he's making fun of the other guys and saying, he's mouthing off to Boots, he's mouthing off to Bobby, saying he doesn't want to endure another 4 months of freezing. And he's like, see, the difference is between me and most of you guys, you've all accepted that you're scrapping around, just scrounging in existence. I want to get out of here, basically. And one of the other guys is like, we're all here for a purpose, John, like the guy that's surly, his name John. So, you shouldn't look down on the rest of us. And, he doesn't really buy into that. And again, he seems just belligerent, and he starts talking about how the other guy's brown-nosed Spawn, and, they shouldn't do that. A lot of what they're after, or a lot of what they're dealing with, recent tribulations and whatnot, is because of Spawn. And one of the other guys brings up the idea of Jesus, and it starts sort of a philosophical conversation. And Bobby says, well, I don't know, what I might believe or not believe, but I know I still have hope. And he talks about his daughter, when his wife died, how he and his daughter both had problems, how they both kind of fell apart. His daughter fell into drugs, but she put her life together, and she gave him this little glass deer, and it's kind of his symbol of hope and whatnot. But again, this guy John, he's like super belligerent. He gets in everybody's face, and he says, I don't know why, you think you're better than me. Why would God like you better? And, this other guy is saying, it's not our deeds that get us into heaven. You just have to believe in Jesus. And, this guy John's like, he doesn't even believe in heaven or hell or any of that stuff. He's like, what a load of crap. And that's when Spawn shows up. He's like, why is it a load of crap? And, of course, John, being ever the belligerent guy, blames Spawn for any number of things, says, why don't you mind your own business? And Spawn, now keep in mind the frame of mind that Al Simmons is in here. He just lost his face again, lost his chance to see his wife. He's like, I asked you a question. He says, okay, fine. You want to know what makes me puke? It's the separation. It's the judging. If you don't follow a certain set of rules, you're in hell. And, you could do terrible things and whatever, and you go to hell. I just don't buy it. These people that are praying to this invisible thing, and there's no proof, and like he goes on and on. Like, he's got a whole speech, and he's talking about God discriminating, and if God's supposed to be good, why does He let bad things happen? Like all the typical stuff that people that don't believe or are kind of, it's one thing to not believe, but to be antagonistic about it. And he says, so what do you think, Spawn? And Spawn goes, well, what I think is I guarantee you there's both good and evil. So in a way you're both wrong, because I know there's a heaven and I know there's a hell because I've been there, but I also know that it's not black and white. It's not these stereotypes. The truth is somewhere in the middle, because you can do good things and still end up going to hell. You could do bad things and still end up in heaven, which is what we've seen throughout the series. It says it's a gray area, that where everything lives. So, and it's not because they control us, it's because they don't control us. They give us these choices, and we're free to make our own, our own judgments. This guy's like, all right, well, I might not know who you are or where you came from, but you're not right in the head, and I don't really have anything to listen. I don't have to stand here and listen to this. And as he walks off, he slaps Bobby's hand, and that glass deer that meant so much to him, falls to the ground and breaks. And Bobby's like really distraught. And I felt so bad for Bobby, and I kind of wish that Spawn had used a little of his power to fix it. I mean, I don't know, maybe he doesn't know how to use his power that way, but I kind of wanted to see that.
I think he might be, a little wrapped up in himself. Like, he's not thinking about repairing the glass deer. He's like involved in this conversation, this philosophical debate on the nature of good and evil, right and wrong, our places in the universe, yada yada. And it's I completely agree. It's so sad because Bobby had this whole story about his daughter and how she came to find him. Like she had a rough life but got out of it, and so she gave him the deer as a symbol for him. Like, he's going through a hard time, he can get out of it, and he's just crushed by this. And I really love Bobby's character because he's got so many different layers and dimensions. Like, he's not just this drunk guy that Spawn hangs around all the time. Like, he's got history with Spawn, but he's also his own life and his own problems that he's dealing with. And it's this Johnny guy. Like, I was kind of on Johnny's side for a good portion of the conversation. I agree he came off very antagonistic during their debate, but his points I thought were accurate. And from his perspective, he doesn't know the sort of like lore and mythos of the universe the way that Spawn and other characters would. Like, we, the audience, know because we get to see these supernatural things happening. We know that it doesn't matter what you do in life. It's one for one. It's pretty random on whether you heaven or hell. Like, you die and then one person goes to hell, you die, and then another person goes to heaven. Like, it doesn't matter the deeds or bad deeds that you do. It's just down the middle. And we, the audience, know that, but he doesn't. So he's only got the evidence, like the actual historical and religious evidence that history and the modern provide. So in that sort of context, his commentary, I kind of believe I'm on his side of the conversation. I think that, a lot of religious people say, like, you need to follow a certain creed, but then other religious people say you have to follow this creed. There's so many different people that say that they're right and their gods are correct ones, but they've been believed for thousands of years, so which was right? And so does any of it really matter? None of it really matters. Like, we shouldn't accept a bad situation that we're in, and I think that's kind of where he's coming from. That's the origin of the whole debate, was that he isn't happy or satisfied with where he's at, being homeless, being in these streets, and all the other guys are just like, well, where we're meant to be, God put us here. And he's like, that's not how I see it at all. like, I'm out of this. And then that's when the other guy is like, yeah, but I believe in Jesus, and he for a reason, and here for a reason. And then the other guy jumps in, he's like, oh, but it's not just believing, it's also good deed. And that's how the whole conversation got started. It's such an interesting conversation because normally the characters don't talk about, like, this kind of stuff from all these different angles. Each one has a very unique perspective on this. And, you know, I think it's really solid writing because it shows these different angles of a topic. And then Spawn jumps in and he's got some, like, meta knowledge that none of them know about. And he's got things too. He's like, you know, there's some good and bad in all of it. So you're both wrong.
Yeah, they're both wrong, and in a way they're both right. And yeah, I mean, it's not like these are answers that homeless guys are. I mean, there's world-renowned religious scholars that can answer these questions. So it is interesting that these guys are thinking about it. I will say I would be more likely to put some stock in what John says and maybe be more, you know, willing to hear his side if he wasn't so, like, belligerent. And then obviously with what happens later, you're just like, this guy's just not a good guy. But
he's real mean. He's mean about it.
He is.
And yeah.
But it is interesting when Bobby's kind of, you know, feels sorry for himself, and the other guy's like, will you listen to yourself? Why are you feeling sorry for yourself? You know, if you want to end your misery, then just kill yourself. You know, but you won't. You want to know why? Because you're afraid. You're holding out for something more. We all have hope. We're all waiting on a miracle. You know, so. That's kind of interesting as he kind of storms away. So meanwhile, John's gone and met up with some of his other homeless buddies. I was wondering, like, why are you even, if you don't like those guys, why are you hanging out with those guys if you have these other, you know, homeless buddies to hang out with? So what we find out is that these guys are actually the ones that give the homeless a bad name. You know, they're out there robbing people. They're talking about knocking over pawn shops and getting some money and trying to get out of being homeless. The problem is there's like 5 of them, and, you know, robbing pawn shops, you get just a little bit of money. It only lasts you a few days, and then, you know, you're right back where you started, especially if they're using them for drugs or alcohol or that sort of thing. But what John doesn't know is that Spawn was curious enough to follow him. And he confronts John after he hears John talking about going and doing these robberies, and he's like, so now I know why you don't want to answer to a higher power, because you don't want to believe that you might go to hell. You know, oh, if there's no God, if there's no afterlife, there's no heaven, no hell, that frees you from any sort of morality, you know. And Spawn goes on to say, you don't want to condemn people to a living hell, so you might as well kill them, right? Because, again, you're not doing anything bad, they're not going to hell. And Spawn said, so it's like I said, you know, in that gray area, you're choosing what you become. And this guy says, is that right? So you're going to, why are you picking on me? You know, why are you who you are? You know, some freak in a costume. That's who you chose to be, and you're going to come after me? Makes you better than us, thinking, you know, that you're all high and mighty, you have these powers. Like these other guys you might have fooled them, but you know, that's not who I am. I don't care. I don't believe in you. I don't believe you're any better than I am. And Spawn's like, well, it's not my problem what you believe or don't believe, because whether you like it or not, I've seen things that you haven't, you know. And those other guys are willing to trust you and you know, befriend you, and you're willing to betray them. And again, we hear this, you know, philosophy from John. I'm just looking out for number one. I'm looking out for myself. I can't care about anybody else, you know. Mm-hmm. So Spawn's like, you know what? You're just a hypocrite and you're a coward. And that pisses off John. He's like, because Spawn tells him, you need to move on. You need go do whatever you're going to do somewhere else, but not here, not, you know, among the people that I protect. And John's like, oh, really? You going to tell me what to do? Pulls out his gun, shoots Spawn. Normally you would think, okay, costume's going to protect him, no big deal. Spawn's as surprised as anybody, as surprised as us, when the costume does nothing. John unloads 3 or 4 more shots. Again, costume does nothing to protect him. And and Spawn starts bleeding. It's green from the necroplasm and whatnot. And John's like, man, what kind of freak bleeds green? And so Spawn says, you know what, you're a dead man. And just as he's about to attack, the other guys pull their guns out, and they just unload. And again, the costume does nothing. Spawn is shocked that he's been damaged like this. I mean, it's not only that he has the powers and that his costume protects him, but just in terms of his mass and how big he is. We know he weighs over 400 pounds. We know he's a big guy, but that many guns firing all at once, it does a lot of damage. And so he's knocked back, and he's kind of laying there helpless. And John's like, yeah, sucks to be on the receiving end for a change, huh? And he walks right up, sticks the gun right next to Spawn's forehead, pulls the trigger, and we see necroplasm go flying out of the back of Spawn's skull, and that's how the issue ends. So, talk about a bad day. So, Al started off thinking
bang.
His day definitely ended with bang. He started off thinking that he was still looking human and going to go see his ex-wife for the first time in a long, long time, and it ends with him getting his brains blown out. I'll say brains in quotations because technically, again, not a human body. But yeah, the big question obviously being, what the hell's going on? What happened to Spawn's powers? And I couldn't help but think of what we saw a couple of issues ago, where he got all disoriented and kind of wobbly and couldn't walk or whatever when he absorbed too much evil. So I was thinking, I wouldn't go so far as to call these guys evil, but they're not good. Maybe they are evil. I don't know. They're willing to kill and for just a few dollars. So I don't know if it was being in the presence of that evil, or if Spawn is just sick in some way. So pretty interesting turn of events, though. What was that?
When I was reading it the first time, I was just as shocked as you. Like, I had no idea what just happened. Why is his suit not working? I was trying to, scour through previous issues because I didn't know what was happening. I was like, oh my gosh, is he dead? How as the series goes on? Spawn or something? So, yeah, it was very disorienting to have this kind of, plot point happen. Spawn's dead. He just had his head shot off, and his suit isn't healing him. They'd mentioned before, head trauma or head damage, is a way to potentially kill beings from hell. So I was so worried. It's a very interesting issue.
Yeah, the other thing, because I was thinking along the same lines, I'm trying to do like you do in a movie. Okay, how's he still alive? So he doesn't actually have a brain. So could the bullet has just gone through, and he'll be okay. But I mean, you look at that picture, it looks like the whole back of his head, is blown off, and clearly he's been fired at by the police previously. He's been fired at, automatic weapons by the mob, by all of Jason Wynn's soldiers and whatnot, and he just shrugs it off like it's nothing. Like it's nothing.
Back in the Harry Houdini the Harry Houdini arc, he got the face in that one too.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah. So it what is it? What could it be? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, to that point, when we were doing the recap, we talked about the shoelace that he had to use to stitch up his face because he got Batman threw a batarang at point blank range and it stuck in the middle of his face. But that's my point. It stuck in the middle of his face. It wasn't like it went through. Obviously, a batarang is not going to be traveling at the speed of a bullet or what have you. But It still was only superficial damage that he had to stitch up. So yeah, you just wonder what. I mean, I don't know what I was more shocked at, the fact that these bums were able to just fire their guns at him and knock him back and knock him out. I mean, he pretty much looks unconscious when he's sitting there or when he's laying there before John walks up and puts his gun right up to his face. I mean, he he does talk, so he's not completely knocked out, but he's clearly incapacitated. So, yeah, so to see that was pretty surprising.
Yeah. When I was first reading it, it felt like the end, like, how does he get out of this? And it just makes everything so much better. So many more wrinkles, like, ripple out from this, and the introduction of something that we're going to find out in this next issue.
Yeah, I'm going to be very, very curious to see how that all plays out. The other thing that's interesting about this issue is, you talked about, how well written it is, and really it is. I mean, it's an issue that's basically told in 3 acts, which is kind of classic story structure. The first act is Sam and Twitch in their office with the crazy alien, I was kidnapped by aliens lady. And then the second act is the homeless guy sitting around talking about, as we intimated, these really big questions about good and evil and, God and the devil and heaven and hell, like these big philosophical questions that are debated as we're introduced to this new belligerent homeless guy, John. And then the third act, of course, being where Spawn goes to confront John and his other cronies, I'll call them. So other than, and I wouldn't, it's not like it's a fight scene, but I suppose it is action in a way when John and his cohorts unload on Spawn. But Spawn doesn't have a lot of agency in terms of physical action in this issue, but yet it feels fast-paced, and it's a compelling story because you get drawn into these ideas that McFarlane has given us here. I mean, this is an urban horror story, but in a lot of ways it's also a morality tale, and it's so interesting because you sort of think that what John is saying is not so far from what Al Simmons himself might believe, but yet when it's framed and coming from John, it's almost like Al is making the realization that what he has thought all this time is wrong, Because, I mean, when Spawn confronts him, John even says, I'm just looking out for myself, And Spawn calls him a hypocrite. You hypocrite, you coward. It's like, hey, I'm just doing, what I need to do. I'm just looking out for number one. Isn't that what Al Simmons has been doing? Like, he goes up to Terry, says, I'm taking my wife back. So hopefully this is a wake-up call for Spawn, for Al Simmons, and he realizes, yeah, dude, you think John's a hypocrite and a coward? Well, you have more power than him, and what have you been doing with it? So
yeah. It's interesting because, like any good character, there's progress and regress. We always want them to progress more, to like grow as a person and, like get towards that better self that you can see the potential for. And we've seen Spawn regress a lot lately. He's gone through so much, and then we saw him make amends with Terry back into 54, and it was great. But then he regressed, and as soon as he had an opportunity, he was going to take Wanda from Terry. And it's like you built a bridge, and then you immediately burnt a bridge.
Yep.
And it's here, hopefully, like this is a sign, like, okay, maybe he's reflecting a little, maybe he's thinking about his actions again, and maybe he's, kind of like stewing in, the consequences of his choices.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. But another thing that's pretty interesting is that idea of hope, and how it's contrasted. Even it's not just John and the other homeless guys that don't agree. There's the one guy, I don't know if he's named, the one African American guy who brings up God. The first time, he doesn't even necessarily believe the same thing that like Bobby believes, for example, when Bobby's feeling all depressed, he even says, well, if you feel that bad, why don't you just go kill yourself? Well, you won't, because you have hope. So he's arguing his point as well. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance.
that's an interesting perspective, and that's a very common perspective, that if there is no God, and there is no objective good and evil, there is no objective morality. If that doesn't exist, then why do any of us bother? Why don't we all just kill ourselves if there is no objective morality and nothing matters? Well, no one wants to die. That's one side of the argument that I wish that had been represented here. There's a couple points of view had gotten thrown in, but I am the medium. This is a comic. You can't have every point of view represented in a dense and complicated subject matter like this. So it's worth talking about. A lot of people think that it's impossible to be a moral person and live a good life and be kind and courteous to others without the idea of a deity to kind of hold you accountable. There's so many people, atheists choose to live good, happy lives and do good things for other people. They don't actually believe in a God. They literally think that there is no such thing as a God. So why do they do it? Well, it's because it's good to do good for other people. Like we live in a society, we coexist with each other, and so it benefits me to help you, and helping you would. It's a complicated topic, and it's very interesting. I love when McFarlane dives into material like this, because it gets reader thinking about these things and how they feel, because maybe they disagree with several of points of view that these characters are presenting. Like when I read it, I disagree with this guy. It's like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in a deity. So there's I don't need someone bigger than me to hold me accountable to do good things for other people. Like, I just know that it's the right thing to do. And yeah, it's very interesting. I love it when the writing goes in these directions.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And the other thing, last thing I'll point out is, again, not a ton of action in this issue. Capullo does a great job of making it compelling. We talked about that opening bathroom scene, and yeah, it's gross. The guy's eating while he's sitting on the toilet, but at least he makes it an interesting-looking bathroom with, holes in the plaster and, pinups on the wall, and yeah, the detail that goes in. And same thing with these characters when they're having these philosophical conversations, these big ideas. A lot of emotion in the faces. He does a fantastic job of that. And then obviously when we do get to the action, it's definitely visceral. Although that last scene of Spawn kind of losing his green stuff out of the back of his head wasn't as brutal as it could have been, and I sort of appreciated that. Like, we get the gist. I know Capullo could have made it a lot grosser than that. I appreciated that he didn't. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Any last thoughts before we wind this one down, Blake?
No.
Okay, everybody. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. We'll be on to the next issue of Spawn number 68, next time. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Later.